Welcome to episode 32 of Feeling Through Live.
That's my age.
Oh,
I'm
well,
32.
what are the chances? Look at that.
Just
See,
kidding.
we're already off to a great start here.
You mirror. Are you kidding?
Well, Debra, I'm so excited to be able to talk to you really at any time, but today especially, because it's the day after the Media Access Awards, which were last night, which were incredible.
Thank you.
And I'm so excited to talk about not just the awards itself, but the history around it, your involvement, and a lot of amazing things that you've been able to do. I'm gonna read just a little bit about you real quick, but then I'd love to hear from you. But just for everyone, and again, it'll be better in your words, Debra, but the Media Access Awards are dedicated to the accurate portrayal and employment of people with disabilities in all media. And Debra, in addition to being the chair and producer of that award show, she's also the chair of the diversity committee for the Producers Guild of America. And
Sorry, was till last year.
okay, sorry, I was reading an old bio for you
I
there.
know, it's my fault.
So are you still the chair of the Women's Impact Network? Are you still part of that?
No, that's, actually, the Producers Guild has gone through a restructuring
Okay.
of all the committees. So while I did that for about 14 years, now everything is under one committee called the One Group.
Okay.
So it's an umbrella thing, and the media access really has now is so much of my focus that yeah.
And on that note, it is a very serious undertaking. But why don't you, in your own words, tell everyone what the Media Access Awards is?
So the Media Access Awards was launched, created by Norman Lear and a producer named Fern Field in 1979. And it was to celebrate the portrayal of disabilities in media. But if you think back, or if you think of 1979, there was no disabilities in media. So there was very little to celebrate. And they were just really ahead of their time. But still the awards existed for many years. But eventually people moved on, and the funding was lost, and sort of the media access ceased to exist. And in 2010, as I was the Producers Guild of America diversity chair, together with my counterparts of the different guilds, we had done the first ever sort of coming together of the guilds when we did the Women's International Day in 2010. And it was such a great experience of collaboration, where the writer came from the Writers Guild, the producer came from the Producers Guild, the actors came from SAG-AFTRA. It was directed by someone from the Directors Guild. So it was a really organic and amazing collaboration. And we said, what else can we do? And it was coming up, October was coming up, and we said, what about disabilities? And we decided to do a one-off of the Media Access Awards. But, it was a breakfast at the Peninsula Hotel here in Los Angeles. And, each guild put up, I don't know, $500 or $1,000. And we rented a room, we got some coffee, some bagels, and we Xeroxed the program. And as I'm sitting there and just watching this thing happen, I realized I was hooked. And that was 11 years ago. And that was my first major involvement with disabilities advocacy, and I realized that there was a lot I could do for that, and there was a lot I wanted to do. And my husband had passed away in 2008, and he had cancer. And I remember how, the sicker he got, the more ostracized he got. And it was just like it all came together in my head, and I thought, this is something I really have to do. And now it's turned into a very big event. And and besides the yearly award celebration, we also do we wrote a best practices guide for the Writers Guild in terms of like how to what's allowed by law or not when you're interviewing a writer with a disability, how to accommodate people with disabilities on a set. And, it's sort of like it's a 10-page manual and makes it really easy for people to read and understand. We have also partnered up with the Blacklist and the Writers Guild Disabilities Committee, where we do an annual list of the best unproduced scripts that have a character with disabilities as one of the main characters. We do a series of online interviews, just a series of things. And our focus is media, because I come from producing and my partner, Alan Rucker, comes from writing, and this is what we understand. We also understand the power of media when you sort of make something, you bring images and storylines and characters into your own home. They become your family and thus not strangers anymore. And we believe that we can impact society by creating responsible content that really sort of normalize the disability experience.
Yeah, you beautifully put. And I'm just curious because I want to get much deeper into all those topics you just brought up. But kind of before we get into that, I'm just curious to learn a little bit more about kind of your personal journey to get here and kind of what brought you into this space, or how you really got involved in this space.
Well, I mean, it's like I said, it was like I really had come from caring for someone for 2.5 years through their fight for survival. I had been in many hospitals in different states, and I had seen people do the same. And I saw how lonely it is when people are ostracized, and that really touched me deeply. And and I guess I am from Brazil, and my family is a Jewish family in Brazil. They came from Eastern Europe, so I've been always a little bit on the outside, um, although just because of my personality, I never feel like, it's like if somebody has a right, I have a right to, and period. But I realize that that's just my personality. Not everyone is the same way. And sometimes people need advocates because, and I'm not better or worse than anybody. It's just a personality, and, I'm just like, I have a big mouth. So, it's just a matter of personality. So I thought, I can use my big mouth for something, something that, I think it's really, really important. And, and that first year when we did the Media Access Awards back in 2010, it was just so amazing because I saw, young people with disabilities seeing themselves on a tiny stage being celebrated for their accomplishments. And I realized how important that was, because we were helping those young people see themselves reflected, celebrated, and represented. And back in 2010, even, there was such little representation. I mean, when we wanted to award people with the Media Access Awards, we were like digging really deep to find a writer, a producer, a director, a casting director, an actor who deserved to be awarded. I mean, it was really hard. There was like, oh, this is not exactly right, but that's what we need to do to get it moving. And amazingly, now we have, it's like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Oh, no, let's look at that. So there's a lot more shows, a lot more movies, a lot more directors, a lot more writers, a lot more content for us to look at, which is amazing and really rewarding. But 11 years ago, it was like, we really need to call attention to the lack of representation of people with disabilities in media. There's like 1%, and this is the largest minority, not just in the United States, but in the world. And if people don't see themselves reflected on television or in film, they don't exist. This is the way we create culture. This is the way we create society. If we don't create tools for people to also participate in the exchange of points of view and life experience, we are robbing ourselves from a very rich existence. Every time we are allowed to step into someone else's shoe, we grow in our own personal lives and experiences. So it was like a lose-lose for everyone. Lose for people that didn't see themselves represented, and lose for the general audience that was being robbed from seeing and sharing experiences that were outside of their life scope. So anyway, that all of that just made me, every year more and more sort of like figure out ways to get the message out, to get people involved, and really be passionate about, sort of changing the landscape.
Yeah, and I obviously, I've been, feeling through platforms been like the biggest part of my life over the last couple of years, and have learned a lot through that process, and certainly in making a film that stars an actor with a disability. I've learned, it's been like a master class for me these last few years in learning about this space. And you know there's a lot of things that you just pointed out that are so clearly important as to why we need more representation for any marginalized group, but particularly the disability community, which makes up nearly a quarter of our population, yet is like 5% of characters on the screen. I mean, I think that number's starting to change a little bit, but has been historically a tiny fraction of the characters that we see portrayed in film and TV. And then of those characters, such a small percentage have been played by actors with disabilities, which again is starting to change. But we're still far away from where we need to be. But I just think of, just purely from a storytelling standpoint, as someone who, for me, at least in my stories, I always want my stories to reflect the world that we live in. And it feels so false to not include people who make up a large percentage of the people in who you're going to encounter and who are around you. So I think just from that standpoint as well, and then there's something else that I know is something that's really important to Media Access Awards, which is not just the representation, it's how are those characters being represented, and are they being played authentically, and are actors with disabilities getting the opportunity to play characters with disabilities. Can you talk about a little bit about kind of historically the function of characters with disabilities, and how that feels like it's really starting to change? But can you go a little bit into that?
Well, I mean, in the past, and this is just something that it's not necessarily malicious, but it's just out of ignorance. Writers used to create characters when they were characters with disabilities that were either inspirational or, sort of drunks and drug addicts, people wanting to commit suicide. And it was like, the extremes of those two types of representation. And, while there are people with disabilities that are depressed, as there are people of color that are depressed, as there are people, it's not a mandatory quality of a person with disabilities, and it's only a projection of the able-bodied people onto people that have disabilities. And and again, that's not a malicious projection, it's just out of ignorance. Because, when we think of disabilities, um, the normal thinking is there is something wrong, or a person with disabilities is less than, and it's difficult for someone who is not disabled to think that's just who that person is. They're not you. They're not, this is who they are, and they're complete and complex, and, and beautiful and ugly and happy and sad, like every other human being. And we all have our distinct experience. So that's something that we really fight against, which is this notion people with disabilities exist to inspire us into seeing that our lives, after all, aren't so bad. And it's really the objectification of someone with disabilities. And again, that's not made, that's not malicious behavior, it's just out of ignorance. So we really try to educate people that you are, it's the reflection of your thoughts, it's not the reality. Each person has their own experience of life, and you cannot, just because you're different, you can't think in those terms. And it's interesting because a friend of mine saw, very close friend of mine saw the media access yesterday, and we are very close, and he said, I loved it, it was all perfect, but I really feel like you should have had a song that's of hope, of inspiration. And I said, exactly, because of what you just said, that we don't have that. It was an award show. It was not meant to inspire anybody. It was just meant to be funny, moving, and entertaining. It's not inspirational. We got to get that away from people's thoughts of disability, sort of the connection of those words. So, the media access really cares about the portrayal of disabilities, and we really try to make a point that you do not, people with disabilities are complex, independent, whole people that have different experiences. And, it's not for the existence or the benefit of someone who is not disabled.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's so interesting about storytelling, it's so contextual, right? So it's like we're operating in a context where for so long there's been so little representation for this community. The representation for quite a long time was, as you were pointing out, in the specific ways you did, not accurate or helpful often. And the hope is that, and I think what the Media Access Awards does so well in not just highlighting achievements for people with disabilities throughout media, but the way in which you put on the awards show, which is just like any other high-level award show. It's not like the actual presentation of it's not like, oh, here's the disability award show, and let's like you said, have inspiring music, or it's like, no, it's a high-level award show for people with disabilities and stories about people with disabilities. But it's like it's more about like that high-level award show, just like any other high-level award show, like that parody, but likeness to that you'd see, from the Oscars or the Golden Globes, and I think it's important for people who maybe are, coming to the disability community, and in this case, the disability community in media for the first time, and to have it look like other award shows they're familiar with. And to start to go like, yeah, it's not really that different from anything else. And I think you do such a great job of how you put that on.
That is like my number one goal. This is an award show. How do you do an award show? You have to have entertaining acts. So I for this one, I went to two people that I think are amazing. Evan Ruggiero in New York, who is an incredible tap dancer. He happens to have one leg, but he's an incredible tap dancer. And he sings, and we created this thing about being on a rooftop and then being in a bar, so it's super entertaining. And then Alan Silver, my fellow countryman, he's also from Brazil, and he was in America's Got Talent this last season. He was one of the 5 finalists, and when I saw his act, I was like, I want him in the Media Access Award. And it's beautiful, it's just like he's an acrobat, an aerialist, and it's a beautiful act. And it's not, we're not making any concession for the fact that he's a little person. It's a beautiful act to a tall person, short, little person, fat person, skinny person. None of that matters. Just a beautiful, entertaining act. And that's what we want to do. Amazing, entertaining acts. And then, our host, Niall DeMarco, who is deaf, he was an amazing host. It's like impeccable. He's beautiful to look at. He is poised. He's so self-assured. He was amazing. And, and then we give people tools to watch the show. It's all open caption and audio described. So, it's no big deal. We're just creating great content, and then we're making sure everyone who is interested has the ability to enjoy it.
And this year was clearly very different from years past, in that you had to move everything virtual. And obviously, being someone myself, I have a lot of respect for anyone who pulls off a high level virtual event, doing a lot of these live streams and virtual events myself. I mean, you really did such a tremendous job. It was impeccable and looked beautiful from start to finish and was so smooth. Can you talk about, what went into this year specifically, knowing that it was such a different experience from years past?
I mean, I knew, so when I do these shows, I have to press responds to celebrity. Press does not respond to causes usually. Press does not respond to writers or directors or producers. They respond to actors. So I always try to get some name actors, because I want the press to write about the media access so that the message gets out there. And then, obviously honor and celebrate talent with disabilities. So it's always, sort of putting these pieces together. And that is any year just trying to, sort of unite the idea of getting the message out there, and also the sponsors want to make sure that a lot of people see their names, and I want the sponsors to come back next year. So there is a, sort of a success attached to this, because I want to continue to do this, and that's just reality. Like it or not, it is the way it is. And also I want to always do something that is, it's really good and respectful and has integrity. So all these things have to come together. And then I knew that most people will be home. So I knew that presenters and recipients of the awards would be home, and I would have to capture them like, what we're doing now via Zoom or via some other app. So I thought the only way I'm going to get some production value is by getting a host to be on a stage. And when I started thinking about that, I thought, oh, the host will be live and we'll be cutting back to the host live. And then I thought, no, it's insane because the internet goes down and we're all screwed. So let's then produce this as if we were producing a television show. So it's all pre-recorded. We'll go live when it's streamed, but it will all be pre-recorded. Once I decided that, I wanted to do, I wanted either a green screen stage or I wanted a LED stage. So I wanted to use uh, like the greatest technology available out there to create, a Kodak Theater, a Lincoln Center, bring that production value to those elements, to the host, to the stage, because I knew that's where I would get the production value. So, I started calling around and visiting different studios in Los Angeles. And then I came across this amazing, and actually was a referral from my editor, Jenny Gold, and she, who's also a person with disabilities, and I've been working with her for, God, 7 or 8 years now. We butt heads, but we have a great working relationship. And, she said, have you checked out the studio, Castle Studios in LA? I said, no. I went there and I was like, this is it. This is it. It's a green screen, but it's a real-time green screen. So you create an environment, and then, as you're shooting, you are seeing how the person is relating to that environment. It's not done in post-production, and it's really amazing. And I worked with the artists at the studio, and we created the environment. So it seems like there's a lot of, I always say I'm all for bling. I'm always for bling. I think bling is good. So, we put a lot of bling on the set and a lot of colors and made it look like really big. And I think that's where our production value came from. And then I always had entertainment in media access. And so I thought about 2 acts. And I went to Vegas and I shot, Alan doing his aerial act. And then, in New York, I hired another group to shoot that because, I could drive to Vegas from LA. New York was a bit much, being that we're all locked up. And so it was just, we designed the performance over Zoom. And when we agreed on locations and everything else, we just had that shot. And yeah, and we really worked hard on putting the video packages of the work of the recipients and really finding the scenes and the episodes that reflected why we were honoring them. And I think it all worked. It's just a very, blessed experience.
I'm going to just take a quick pause for an interpreter switch. All right, all set? Great. Continuing here. Yeah, that was, everything looked so great, but that live green screen backdrop, interactive backdrop for Niall DeMarco was incredible. It looked so great, and again, really, these are the things that elevate this award show to like the award shows that everyone's been familiar with for a long time, like the Oscars and the Golden Globes. It's that attention to detail and that level of execution that really elevates something like the Media Access Awards into that arena. And I think what we'll see, I know in the last 10 years since you've revived it, I know it's grown tremendously from that first one that you talked about when you got it back up and going. And I'm sure over the next 10 years, it's only going to grow so much more, to the point where, I think, people are going to continue to tune in larger numbers. And I think people are going to start thinking about it in a very similar way to like other major award shows that they've been familiar with for a long time. And I think, again, that it's the prestige that you brought to it that in this case is so important. A lot of times, I know in a lot of responses we've gotten, for Feeling Through has, and anyone who's done any sort of, film or TV where there's really positive and, an authentic representation for characters with disabilities, people are really praise the fact that it's like really elevating a community from a media standpoint that was previously not represented at all and really not found. Again, Robert being the first deafblind actor in a film to star in a film that was completely non-existent, and how important it is. A lot of people in the community reflect back to us how important it is to not only have that representation, but have it in a way that's, executed and exhibited in a really, like, on a really high level, so that, people en masse can come to it and really have that communion with the story, and therefore, by extension with the community. And I think that's something that's often missing with the disability community as a whole is really having these special events around it, and really elevating it to this really like high and cherished level. And that's really more than anything what I took away from last night in watching it, and just I thought I was really stunned by it. I really was.
I mean, I mentioned just a little while back that I butt heads with Jenny. Sometimes I will tell her we need to lose 2 frames. 2 frames, it's nothing. But I say, I see it. We are 2 frames over. We got to cut those 2 frames. It's like, 2 frames. It's like, yes, 2 frames. And I think that's how you approach everything. And again, there's never any manipulation of like, well, let's make this moment. It's just a very matter of fact, celebrate a beautiful celebration of work. And I think that is what really stuns people that are not involved with the disability community. It's like how normal all these interactions actually are. And one of the people working with me, and for the first time this year, with actor Steve Way, he uses a breathing machine, and he said, "Oh, okay, so we're going to cut the sound out from the breathing machine." And I said, "Why?" He uses a breathing machine. It's like that's part of, that's how he lives. There's nothing to cut. That's how it is. And because it makes you uncomfortable because you're projecting, that's your problem. That's not his problem, and it's not my problem. So I think that is also what's so important about the Media Access Awards, is the full inclusion of how people actually are in this world. And Steve is an amazing, talented guy. For people that have not seen Rami, and I think Rami has audio description for the show. Because I think Hulu is one of the companies that have actually taken the great step forward of having audio described shows. It's a very funny show. It's a very funny show. And Rami does exactly what the Media Access Awards does, which is normalize people's experiences. Like, this is just the way it is. No more, no less. nothing. It's just what it is, and let's move on and live life, which is uh, amazing and brutal for everyone on this planet.
I love Rami. I love that show, and certainly Steve is so great on that show, and their relationship is amazing. And like you said, just by it being like two young guys just trying to figure out all aspects of life. One happens to be brown and the other happens to be disabled. Like, but they're just doing their thing. Like, and I think that the focus being on them just being two guys like anyone else trying to figure out life. Really goes a long way in giving people a much more like insider empathetic connection to communities that they might not normally have really empathized and stepped inside of before, and people that they haven't necessarily stepped inside of before. And you have such, you get such great talent to be a part of the award show. Like we were talking about, Niall DeMarco hosted it. You had interludes with Jimmy Kimmel and Andy Samberg and Joshua Jackson introducing Lauren Ridloff and all these amazing people. Can you talk a little bit about from the producer brain side of this, what it's, how you go about attaching the talent in that whole process?
Well, Andy Sandberg, who you just mentioned, had given an interview to the New York Times. I'm trying to think, either, I think in September. And he said that one of the things that had helped him get through the pandemic was, some incredible content that he was having the opportunity to watch. And one of them was Crip Camp. And we were honoring Crip Camp. So it's like, it's a natural to get someone like him who, he talked about Crip Camp on his own. We didn't have to introduce it to him. We didn't have to explain. He just saw that and thought this is a great documentary that talks about something that's really important. It was very genuine. So he's such a nice guy, and he's, someone that is in our popular culture that is a perfect union, which is bring the mainstream to what we're doing, mix it all up, and have really a great result, and sort of sort of make it bigger. So that was Andy Samberg. And Joshua Jackson had done Children of the Lesser God with Lauren Ridloff on Broadway, and he actually learned sign language. And so it was natural for him. They have a beautiful relationship. And that was really the first big thing that Lauren did. So it made sense that Joshua was the one introducing, presenting the award to Lauren. So when we're thinking about who is going to present an award, it's either someone who is part of the project, or someone who is really meaningful to that person. We always also consult with the recipient, because we want them to feel good about who is presenting to them. I would never say, you must receive your award from this person, because it's, if I want to make it special for someone to receive an award, it's got to come from someone who's special to them. So it's like, it's a combination of all these factors. And then, you try to see if you know someone who knows them directly. If not, you appeal to their PR. You explain what you're trying to do. And because I've been doing this for 11 years, I think that most PR companies now know about the Media Access Awards, know what I do, know that their talent always has a good time doing it, and they appreciate what I do. So it's not so hard anymore. But yeah, that's kind of the process, figuring out, those people that are meaningful to the recipient, meaningful to the show, and making it happen.
You were saying before that often the press doesn't respond solely to disability related topics, and that they respond to celebrity. It's nice when celebrity responds to the disability community, like that anecdote you just talked about, Andy Samberg. And I think, I know very fortunately, highlighting the need for more inclusion in Hollywood has been a hot button issue over the last couple of years. Certainly, even going back to like Me Too, and the way that started to kind of unearth a lot of inequities, and a lot of things that have gotten a lot more shine since then. And I think inclusion for the disability community is one that's certainly gotten a lot more coverage. There's still this need, like you said, to have big name people get behind that. And it's nice to see, in addition to Andy Samberg and that anecdote that you just mentioned, I have seen more, notable actors speaking out. I think I saw something not too long ago about Ed Norton and Mark Ruffalo really pressing the industry to cast more actors with disabilities. So it's really nice to see those like kind of organically, some of those alliances and endorsements happening from people who get a lot of attention and get people's eyeballs on certain topics. So it's so cool to hear, when it's someone like that anecdote, like Andy Samberg, of just like him. And again, another example of the importance of media that includes stories about people with disabilities. Crip Camp, which is an amazing documentary that's on Netflix, which was rightfully honored last night, is something that very fortunately got a lot of buzz. I know did really well on the festival circuit before it went to Netflix. None other than Obama and his production company was part of making it happen. And that's the type of thing where that's a story that I think virtually no one knew about outside of like a very small group of people prior to that documentary. Now so many people have seen that, and then you get someone like Andy Samberg who's talking publicly about it, and then gets connected to the Media Access Awards as a result, and it all kind of snowballs. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of that snowball effect, if you go back 10 years to now. But you were also talking about how fortunately there's a lot more competition now in the Media Access Awards. And that because there's a lot more opportunity than there was 10 years ago, where you were kind of like, really searching for people to honor just because there was so little opportunity there. So now, the award show, the 2020 award show having happened last night with, some amazing people like, Lauren Ridloff and Rami and, Crip Camp getting all awarded. How do you now go about, selecting winners, and how is that process different from when you started 10 years ago?
One is just it's like, oh, do we award Ryan O'Connell with special, or do we honor Rami? Or now it's like some really great shows, and it's just exciting to sort of discuss why we should honor a show instead of another. So it's like, oh, Ryan, it's a fantastic show, and he's such a great advocate for disabilities, and he's such a funny guy. Ryan, you just ask him a question and you just let him go. You sit back, you have a drink, and he just keeps on going. And all amazing and funny and insightful and brilliant. But his show on, as a new show in 2020. Okay, so that's why we're not going to honor, special. But it's exciting that we have these discussions of, why we're going to honor a show or an actor or a producer instead of others. And we honored Away, which is also a Netflix series, because there was such a, first I think it's a great show, a great series, and it's beautifully done, and the people involved are really amazing. But there was an organic way of involving people with disabilities The first person we see who is disabled is a psychiatrist, and we see him in the series. I think first episode we see him on a screen being the psychiatrist of one of the astronauts, and here he is talking to her, being smart, intelligent, insightful. And I think in episode 2, if you don't know the actor, you didn't know he was in a wheelchair. And so episode 2, now because he is in an office talking to someone, we get to see that he's actually in a wheelchair. And how amazing is that? That it was like a whole episode that you didn't even know. You just came to know as the story moved on, because there was no need to make a point of that. There was no need to make a point that one of the other characters, it was a person with Down syndrome. It's just, she's just there. She's part of she's the daughter of a family friend of the main characters. And it's just like, so all these characters with disabilities started to pop into the series as just people in the storyline. There was no big thing about making a point of this person has a disability, and one of the main characters becomes disabled as the story moves on. But it's like there's the shock of a change of life, and we have to recognize that there is a shock. You have lived your life one way, now you're going to live your life in a different way. And once that transition period is sort of experienced, then that becomes someone's life, and that became the life of this character, and he moved on. So it was a really beautiful, organic way to create a story, and there were a number of characters and actors with disabilities in the series. So we thought we should honor the producers who went out and really made a point of doing that. None of that was necessary for the story, but they just see the world as we do, which is inhabited by people of color, people with different sexual orientations, and people with disabilities. And that was the world they created in the series away, and we thought they should be honored for that.
You mentioned certainly sometimes in a storyline you need to talk about the disability, right? It's an important, like in the case of someone becoming disabled and adjusting to a different lifestyle. Of course, it's a really important storyline to explore, but also the need for characters with disabilities, not the storyline not being about their disability, and how important that is. How far away do you feel like we are from that being more commonplace? Where do you see the future of storytelling in that sense?
I think both stories are, valid. What I think is like we can't just have stories about people that become disabled, because that's not the full experience of disabilities. That's maybe one experience, which should be explored in storytelling. But the majority is just, and should be, these are our neighbors, our family members, our friends, our spouses, and they happen to have a disability. My partner at the Media Access Awards became disabled in his 50s, and he went through a period of adaptation to his new life. But once that transition happens, he's like, that's who he is now. There's never, there's no accommodation in our relationship of like he is disabled. It's just the way it is. We work together, we yell at each other, we hang up on each other, we almost like married people. But and that's really the most interesting, the more interesting in terms of storytelling, which is bring people in normal interactions that have different experiences. And I mean, I remember years and years ago, my first real big understanding of the power of storytelling when I saw a movie called The Joy Luck Club, and it was about mothers being mothers, you know. And it was the first time that I actually saw my relationship with my mother through the mother's point of view. It was always like, I want, I am, my rights, you know, sort of always my point of view. And this film allowed me to stop like looking at my mother from my point of view and actually look at me from her point of view. And I thought, oh my God, I've been such a jerk, you know. So to, and this is what storytelling can do for us beyond entertain us, is to allow us to see relationships from the other side. And when we do that, we start to understand human beings in a different way. And I think that that's, you know, what we should be doing with storytelling, is bring all these different experiences, the, you know, of people of color, of sexual, different sexual orientations, of disabilities, and have these exchanges and, you know, create these stories where we get to experience, we get to think about what is it like for the other side. It's not just me, 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 me. And so that's the power of storytelling.
Where do you, you know, what kind of impact has the Media Access Awards had since you started it up again, and how do you try to gauge that or understand that?
We've have had incredible impact because two things happen. One, that professional who's being celebrated for doing and recognized for doing a work that includes people with disabilities in a intelligent and complex fashion feels validated for the work they have done. Anybody feels validated, they want to do more. You know, it's just how we function. Oh, I got brownie points, I want more brownie points. And then their colleagues who turn around and say, oh my God, I didn't think about that. That's incredible. I want to do that too. So that's what we do. We sort of support the people that are already doing the work and letting, you know, them know. And as I say that, I'm thinking about Simon Cowell. Okay, so we awarded Simon Cowell with a Visionary Award 2 years ago, and I am a fan of America's Got Talent, as I brought Ellen from that, Ellen Silva, and I just started noticing how many people with disabilities actually went through the show and had a chance to win, and how many of them have actually won the show and have had their lives totally changed because of that show, and how they're treated like anybody else. I mean, if Simon has to say you're crap, he will say. If he needs to say you're great, he's going to say. And I really applaud that. So when we said to him, we'd like to honor you with the Media Access Visionary Award, he said, I didn't think people were noticing what I was doing. And that really is amazing, because he knew what he was doing. He just didn't know people had like really noticed what he was doing in terms of inclusion. And when he received his award, he said, this is the most significant award I have ever received in my life. And I think that right after he received his award. There was a America's Got Talent winners special, and in that there were so many acts of people with disabilities, and I like to think that was also direct impact of like, I got brownie points, I want more brownie points, and that's a really great thing. And maybe I'm wrong, but I've also heard from showrunners and producers and directors who have said this show has changed my life. It has alerted me to to people with disabilities, to the need to create storytelling that really reflects the largest minority in the country.
And the reality of the situation is, as much as you can know specifically how it's had certain impact, there's so much more impact you'll just never know, but is out there and is happening. I think that's one of the interesting things about, now being in the like social impact entertainment space and learning about it, and there being a real focus on, for a lot of people, of really gauging and measuring that impact and getting analytics on it. And look, that's all well and good. I think that's great to have whatever analytics you can get. But the reality is, when you're dealing with media, when you're dealing with the scope of media and how subtly but significantly it can affect and change someone, there's no real way to gauge the kind of. It's funny, the largest the greatest impact that media has, there's no way to gauge. It's like, how do you gauge how much you moved someone's awareness or consciousness about something, or how you stirred someone really deep in their heart when they were watching something, and now, maybe even it might be a year later, but they might encounter someone that they had no context of before and treat them differently as a result. How do you gauge that, right? And there's really no way. Although it is so great to hear those specific anecdotes and stories of how it has specifically created some sort of change. But I love that
I mean, David Roberman, who is a huge producer, um, he said after the Media Access Awards, he went to his casting directors and said, from now on, I want to see people with disabilities as well as any other type of person in my casting calls. It has to change, and it's starting to change now. So I know that also is a direct result of the Media Access Awards, as someone who was like, wow, this is really important. I never realized how important this is for people. And again, in general, people want to do the right thing, and when they realize the importance of representation, and sort of get to think about things that they didn't have the opportunity to think about before, it's really, they will do the right thing. And the other thing about media is that content creators, usually we are working under so much stress and everything has to be done so fast that we have the tendency to just call Bob and Mary and whoever we worked with before, because it's the path of less resistance. So we have to say, okay, we need to change that, and it needs to actually start on the page. We need to start with the writer, write something that, be specific if you have to, about the creation, the psychiatrist, the NASA psychiatrist is an actor, is a character in a wheelchair, just so that it will force the casting director, will force the producer to actually go out and cast someone like that. And until that becomes, sort of second nature to the industry, we really need to make a point out of casting women, in roles that usually women are not cast in, scientists, presidents, and, really make a conscientious effort in doing so. People of color, people with sexual, different sexual orientations, people with disabilities. And once that becomes just second nature to everyone, we don't need to do that anymore. It's just going to be it. But in this period, we really need to think about and make, conscientious decisions that we need to create content that reflects the world we live in.
Well, Deborah, I couldn't think of a better way to wrap up today's episode than what you just said there. That was the perfect button on our conversation.
Oh yeah, we rehearsed it.
Perfect. One just to a T, just like we planned. But no, seriously, just want to thank you again for joining us today and for everything you're doing at the Media Access Awards.
Thank you.
I truly was again, in getting to know you over the last year and be familiar with the awards, like I said to you before we started today, I already had really high expectations, and they were certainly even still superseded with what you were able to put on last night. Just on a closing note, if people missed last night but want to check it out, can they still do so?
Yes, it's online right now. It's MediaAccessAwards2020.com. And again, the show is fully accessible, and we'd love if people check it out.
Well, Debra, thank you again, and thank you to everyone who tuned in today. Last reminder, you can join us tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time for a live discussion and Q&A with a panel of artists who are deafblind, including Robert from Feeling Through, Carol, who is a sculptor, and Sally, who is an author. It's going to be a great time. Go to youtube.com/feelingthrough to join us. And Debra, I hope you have a great Thanksgiving ahead, and I'm glad I caught you before the holidays, and again, right after an amazing award show.
And just want to say, one of my most incredible experiences was the Feeling Through experience. So thank you.
Thank you, Debra. I appreciate that. And all right, well, that wraps up today's episode. We'll see you. I don't know if we're going to be on next week because there's this little holiday called Thanksgiving, so I'm not sure it's going to happen next week. But we'll see you the week after if we're not going next week. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.